But for now, so what we're going to talk about today is the evolution of altruism and how it bears upon the evolution of social behaviour. And a quick word about, because this is the first of my lectures you'll have had, a quick word about the way I'm doing lectures now. When you see, all of this is available from Canvas. I can see lots of people are on this Google slide already. There's a lot of references in my lectures, and I don't want you to feel like you absolutely have to read everything. I've put references where they're relevant, and in every case I've put a reference, you'll see it comes up as a hyperlink, which will take you directly to the website of that paper if you want to get the paper and read it. So we're trying to minimize the effort that it involves in digging up these references. You'll be able to, so when you go to this presentation on Canvas, you'll be able to click on that link and get to the reference. So John Maynard Smith, very famous biologist, and Safmari categorized the major transitions in evolution, talking about great tipping points in evolutionary history. And they identified the transition from genes to genomes, kind of collections of genes, from genomes to cells, from cells to multicellular individuals, and then from individuals to societies, which they say kind of functioning like superorganisms. And it's that, at each step you have a kind of an extra kind of level of selection at the level of the new unit of replication. And it's this transition from individuals to societies that we are concerning ourselves with in the next few lectures, the evolution of social behaviour. And that can be anything from a kind of a loose group of, a relatively loose group of individuals, maybe relatives, like a group of meerkats, all the way to a tightly functioning, a tightly organised eusocial society like those of ants. And we'll be considering all of those different kind of levels throughout this series of lectures. But it's the transition from individuals to societies. And when you make that transition, you start getting we start moving into the behavioural ecology of interactions. So in last year's behavioural ecology, this is a chart that you may remember from one of the first year ecology and evolution lectures that I gave. But you've since done a whole bunch of behavioural ecology to do with the benefits and costs. Last year you were looking at costs and benefits to an individual of performing a particular behaviour. But when you move into a social setting, you now have costs and benefits to the recipient of a particular behaviour. Like if you're doing a behaviour to another individual, that can be positive or negative for you. It can be positive or negative for the recipient. So you have behaviours that are beneficial to the actor, but can be beneficial to the recipient as well, mutualisms, or can have a negative effect on the individual, on the recipient, which is selfishness, kind of grabbing stuff from other individuals. But the ones that we are interested in today is the evolution of altruism, which is where you incur a cost to yourself in order to confer a benefit on a recipient. And just going through a few semantics, these are the terms that we use for these different this benefit cost matrix here. And then if you hear the term cooperation, the evolution of cooperation in nature, we tend to use, this West et al. Reference is all about semantics, we tend to use cooperation to mean any act that benefits another individual, whether or not it benefits you yourself. So that's the distinction between altruism and cooperation. Altruism is something which is specifically costly to you and beneficial to someone else, whereas cooperation can be beneficial to either. So altruism is where we're going to be sitting for this lecture. And by altruism, we're talking about behaviour that runs a gamut from simply, giving an alarm call can be construed as an altruistic act. Giving an alarm call to alert the rest of your group to the presence of a predator. You could have just kept quiet about it and hidden from the predator, leaving the rest of your group vulnerable to the predator. That would benefit you and screw them. But instead, members of groups give alarm calls which directly draw attention to themselves, which can be construed as altruistic, like those Belding's ground squirrels there. And then all the way to complicated feeding, pup-caring, offspring provisioning behaviour for other individuals' offspring. So these mongooses will feed and protect the offspring of other individuals, incurring that energetic cost to themselves in order to benefit somebody else's offspring. So the big question is how, we see this kind of behaviour all the way around the animal kingdom. In fact, Darwin, looking at honeybees and looking at the worker honeybees raising the offspring of other individuals, called this the one insuperable problem that is fatal to my theory. We'll return to that quote later in the lecture course when we think about eusociality. So it's a massive question in behavioural ecology. How do you get altruism evolving? Why would you behave in a way which spreads somebody else's genes and not your own? Well, the first thing to consider is the way we as humans tend to frame the term altruism versus the way biologists tend to frame the term altruism. So when you say the word altruism, the first thing that pops to mind tends to be something like the parable of the Good Samaritan, where people will kind of be truly selfless and give up their own time, give up their own energy and effort and money in order to help other humans. Things like giving to charity, things like giving up your time to help other people. And often people will argue that altruism doesn't really exist in the animal kingdom because strict altruism, using a strict definition of altruism, because or they'll argue that animals are literally being selfless and giving up and kind of selflessly going out of their way to save another animal from a predator. But then there's biological altruism, and the definition of biological altruism is a bit different. And we basically think in biology that strict altruism doesn't really exist. So genes, on a genetic basis, a gene for strict altruism could never spread in a population. Think about the mechanisms you've learnt for the way alleles spread in a population. An allele coding for an animal that would literally reduce the fitness of that gene would very quickly die out. So genes cannot be selected. The way evolution works, genes cannot spread if they produce an effect which decreases their own fitness. That's effectively a contradiction in terms. Genes cannot be selected to produce behaviours that decrease their own frequency. So the problem of how does apparent altruism evolve really basically boils down to how can we explain in evolutionary terms the spread of genes that look like they are reducing their own fitness. In what ways are they actually increasing the fitness of those genes in a way that appears altruistic?